Hey everybody, my name is Jeff, and in this video I've got a little more in the cane mill. I pour the Babbitt for the 4 bearings for those smaller drums. I didn't take time to set the camera up when I was boring the lead out. I figured that was going to go so easy and quick that it wasn't really worth showing, but looking back on it I kind of wish I had. But I do have some on the gears for the ends were worn oblong, the hole through them, and so I set that up in the mill and actually used the coaxial indicator to find a halfway even spot inside them. The very center of them was a little closer, and got it set up, checked it by the OD, and it looked real good, so bored those out. Had to make some sleeves since I had turned the shafts down in the first place, and even if those weren't worn I would have had to do a sleeve for them. So I've at least got some video of that, and one part that, well, I could have cut the sleeve off and bored it out afterwards, but on the first one I had it bored and the OD turned down, and second one I turned the OD and had cut off the end of it where it was the previous one was a smaller OD than the second one, and so cut the leftover off on the end, and since I had the parting tool in, well, I started cutting off the other end. I didn't want to do that because I had it trued up in the forejaw and had planned to bore it first. Well, I didn't cut far enough through it to really matter, so I started boring it, and it ends up, it worked out perfect. Could have said I planned it that way, but I end up, when I'm boring it out and do the final pass, it actually cuts it off from the inside to where I had my groove with the parting tool cut. So it worked out good for a change, and usually don't get that lucky. And then at the end of this video though, I'll try, and we did get some more done on the John Deere 50, so I'll try and do some quick shots of that. I didn't actually take any video of the process of putting it together because that's, you know, nothing really worth watching in the first place. Time consuming and finding pieces and bolts to put back to where they're supposed to be. Thanks for watching, and if you like what you see, try and subscribe, and thanks for any comments and everything that way. Okay, this is a little bit of my lead melting stuff. A couple ladles here. This little pot will probably hold about 10 to probably 12 pounds of lead. But right now all I'm going to do is take these are the bearings off that sorghum press, and timed it about right. It's just getting to the point. I think there's one of them where it's starting to actually rub metal, and a little bit on the end of this one. I'm not going to screw around with that. I think I'll just shave her down a little bit and make a bushing for the gear on there because it's sloppy anyway. So you see these were originally brazed together. This drum here, there's the two smaller ones like this, the other one's bigger. This one actually weighs, just the way it sets with the shaft in the drum, is 32 pounds. And the big drum with the shaft in it is a little over 100 pounds. We'll take these and melt the Babbitt back out of them, probably into my little pot there, because this ladle will go in there good enough that I can use it for filling them again. Just the ladle half full, or a little better than half, will fill one of these bearings up. That's where I'm going to make the jigs, so that I think I'm going to pour them this way. So we'll grab the torch and get some lead out of there. That's what's going on again. still hot. Get you over here where you can see. Sorry about all the shaking. Still on the tripod. Gonna skim off a layer of the crud there. A little cleaner to start with already then. Add a little to her to get all four of them at the same time. Give me room to get the ladle in there, and should be good to go. Get the pieces cleaned up and my jig made, and hopefully get time to do that pretty quick here. There you can see that little groove in there where they made the bottom thicker. Is actually still a little warm yet. Now once I clean them up I can show you. There's actually a lip. Now you can see here part of it's broke off. This one shows up a little more. There's actually a lip in the bottom too to help hold the shaft or the Babbitt in place so it doesn't slide out in towards either end. And then these ridges in there just to keep it from turning. And I see this one's got a crack going over to the center, and I believe one of the other ones did too. So get them cleaned out. And I'll probably put them in the blaster and bead blast them, or might take them over and sandblast them. And these are just some broken pieces of Babbitt I've collected over the years, and some of the, well, when you pour the Babbitt and it fills up your oil hole, you can usually pop that one chunk out. And these are some halves from engine that was done one time. I have no idea back when, but they had corners broke off them when I got it, so re-Babbitted them. Had enough in the pot back then that I didn't remelt these, so I'll probably throw them in and melt them down as long as I'm doing it here. I'm not sure what these came out of that were so rough on there, and don't see too many shafts with double oil holes without grooves cut in them for the oiling. Even these don't have any crosshatch, or usually you'll see some that at least have a groove coming over towards the other end for an oil passage. Not sure what engine they came out of. I think originally I was hanging on to them just to, they would be good enough, you could scrape them and reuse them. A couple of them, or if it was on a shorter bearing surface you could cut off the bad part, but it's usually a lot easier just to pour new ones. And this is some Babbitt I bought quite a few years ago, which got 10 pounds of it there. And this is more of a high-speed Babbitt, so I'm not going to use that for something like this. Then when I was watching Keith Rucker's video, I found out that Babbitt Rate is no longer in business. And this is one, well, I'm not even sure how many years ago I bought it. No, I've never used any of this. I've still got, well, if I can find it, I think it must be where my other lead pots are. This is brand new. Well, there's actually 6 pounds of it here. I had to get my scale out and weigh it for the hell of it. It didn't say on the box, and I guessed it was a 5-pound box. But had a little more in there than I figured they had. And all I need is, like I was mentioning before, I'll probably put a little bit over the hole here, just enough to seal it off so I can pour these setting this way instead of doing a shaft in there and pouring through the hole. Haven't decided for sure yet. I'll probably take, and once I get them cleaned up, look at them some more, and it wouldn't be bad at all to make a jig with a square plate on the end to hold the shaft centered, and that way you can just clamp it on over each end and pour it through the hole. There's actually Keith Fenner did a video where he had the split bearings like these were, where he made the jig to hold on each end with a plate with his shaft in it, poured the lower half and then put it together, poured the upper half, and so you're using your plates to seal off the ends, and does a nice job. With these I think I can do just as easy to stand them on end and pour them that way. I guess we'll find out when I do it. Okay, cleaning up the outside of this drum a little bit. A little out around, had some bad grooves in. You can see the OD's running pretty nice. If you look in here at the inner edge, you can see the casting's off a little. It looks like it's moving around. The OD I've got within 3,000ths. Only going to take probably 15 or 20 off. This one is slightly smaller and out around, like I say. For the Babbitt, it'll work out fine. The Deere, I'll have to check out. I'll probably put a bushing in that. Make a bronze sleeve for it. Go that way. Did clean up pretty good. Gonna take another 20,000ths off, 10,000ths cut, just to clean her up a little better. It does have some deep rust pits out on the end where the Deere rides. They fit a little sloppy originally, the way it looked. It'll be snug now when I get done with it. The other end of this one looks pretty nice, so I may not even touch that. The other drum looks pretty good. Like I say, this one's running nice. Don't see any deflection up and down. As I say, with the dial indicator, the surface is a little rough, but I got it within 3,000ths in the core draw here. So. Center, the live center lined up nice. Recut that a little bit just to get the rust out of it. Should be good to go. Okay, got the blocks cleaned up a little better. Now I'm setting it up in the little mill here to, you can see where it was wore originally from the pulley. And I'm going to machine them off flat for my jig. I did end up turning the shafts down on both drums. The opening is about 2-inch. The shafts are 1.5 inches. About 1/450 right now is what I took them down to clean them up and smooth them out. So I'm going to machine these off so they're flat, so they'll set flat in the jig, and we'll get them set up and pour some Babbitt. Okay, this is the start of the jig I've got for them. And just a piece of 1/4x4 steel that I bored some holes through. We got these turned down the side, so basically what it amounts to is when I machine these off square and flat, I'm going to weld a piece on here to clamp them to. So I can do 2 at a time. And I'll probably use like a piece of angle iron on the end here so it lines it up side to side. And then clamp a piece over here that'll cover the other holes, and I'll just pour them from the top like this. And it should be close enough when I get them knocked off. I'm actually I didn't take time to figure out how much the lead is going to shrink, but I believe I've only undersized by 50 to 60 thousandths. I don't remember exactly what I did end up with. And these are just tacked on the bottom there. just to keep them square and everything that way. And I bored out a piece of scrap aluminum and made a little jig that helps keep them square to this piece. When I clamped them on, flipped it over, welded it, and then clamped this one on, did the same deal. So now once I get the other piece welded on, I may only just put an angle on the inside here of each one, and then when I clamp the other piece across, that'll hold them flush too. I'll do a little experimenting there first and see, and I'll show you when I get it done. You got to stop for each one at the bottom and line them up. Otherwise, I've got some insulating blanket there. I'm going to clamp a piece over the holes to plug that off. Now I'm just going to smoke the shafts and hope that they fit tight enough to the bottom that it won't leak out around there. Get them set up and heat them and get some lead melted. Well, he's sealed on the bottom at least. I want to add that little bit, but that's not going to hurt me too much. So it's out at the very end of the shaft anyway. Like I ended up setting it on top of one of the others, took a brass punch and tapped her. Well, I didn't quite get it all the way out. I don't know if it shows up very well, but she filled up nice. Almost tried running out on the bottom. That'll be nothing to file that off. You can see one of the cracks I talked about before in it that from original. And a little spot where it came up short on the one side where I redid it that shows, but as I say, it should be, it didn't shrink much, and yeah, as Ron just said, an oil pocket. And that's like Keith Rucker mentions, that if you get air bubbles in the top half or whatever, it gives it more places to hold oil. You're only looking for 75 to 80% contact on your bearing surface anyway. But these, since they are a fixed bearing, you don't leave quite as much clearance, or I'm not planning to. I don't know exactly what it's supposed to be for these, but you don't get the, you don't have the shims to adjust them for wear. So what I'm going to do is, if it came out the way I planned it, I've got a machine out, take it and set it up in the mill and bore it out about 40 to 50 thousandths. If it shrank some, it may only be 30 thousandths, but that'll true me back up and everything that way. And I did turn the shafts on the drums, which I think I showed previously, and should be good to go. This isn't the best bench to do that on because the bench bounces too much.
Supposed to be a bench.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, it looks in there. It's actually about like a bearing that's been used already. Little darker streaks here and there. They both came out very good. A little too hot to hold. We'll see if the next two do. Try and do some video of that too.
Got that on video.
This time I just put Babbitt right over the oil hole, and we got the pins just set in place and wedged in. They checked out pretty square, so I'm just going to line these up. I've got to pour it direct out of the pot this time. So as long as I don't bump them with the pot, I'm doing okay. But yeah, I know what's going to happen. Keep these guys a bit. First one I can do with the needle. That's a nice way to splash it on. Close enough for what it's for. Except this one shrank too much already. Probably gonna make a weird spot there, but even this one shrank a little. I think it must have had an air pocket under that little flange in there. But it'll work. Considering they probably only run it. I'll have to measure the RPM when we get using it here in October. I guess those drums are only moving about 30 to 40 RPM, so I could have used pure lead in there instead of the Babbitt pieces that I did have. You can see the original milling marks from when I had them in before I poured the Babbitt, but I did go back through and just mill them off flush, and I doubt that's going to show up inside there. But you can see the line in the center there where I Did some marks and some out to the side for oil passages, little grooves in there, and actually goes on the other way. Not that it matters right now, but then on this end I do need to make a sleeve if I could get it to slide. The other one you can't see it much. There's actually supposed to be a spacer in here. On the one they had it was a piece of 3/8 rod bent in a U shape just setting over the shaft, and it actually was wearing into the end of the bearing housing. And the other one had the washer that's supposed to be on there is probably, oh, it was at least 1/2 inch thick, maybe closer to 5/8, and was big enough diameter to rest against the housing like it should. That way any little slop back and forth is riding on the washer instead of the gear riding against the bearing or anything. And what happened to the other one, I have no idea. But for the hell of it, I'm going to grab the scale here and see what these do weigh all together like this. Well, it looks like this one is exactly 51 pounds. Now, hit it with my arm and it's more than that. And it looks like 23.15 kilogram. I'll put the other one on there just for the hell of it, see what that one weighs. Looks like the other one's a little lighter. It's only 47 pounds 8 ounces, 47.5 pounds then. And that's 21.55 kilogram. Okay, just wanted to throw in here, these are the tie rods off that 530 case that I had the video on doing the ends on. This is how the one was wired in. The ball actually probably wouldn't come out of there. It's get it to stay up there where you could see it. It is getting wore bad enough that you could probably almost work it out, but the odds of it pulling out going down the road or anything would have been slim, but the wire is a good safety measure. But you can see how crooked, well, the very end of it is supposed to be bent for the tie rod end out here. This little bend is supposed to be there, but they had apparently broke the pipe one time before, welded a piece of pipe in between it, and I've seen snakes that were straighter than these tie rods. I don't know how well it's going to show up on camera and everything. You can see that one's got quite a bend in the shaft of the pieces I made. And like I say, this one is bent in a couple spots and both ways, so apparently whoever had it before liked to run into trees or something that way, or fence posts, or I'm not sure what they were doing with it. But hopefully before too long, since she's got them off now, I can get them finished and back on the tractor. Rear wheels taped off and ready to repaint the rims. You can kind of see through the hole here that the two front ones over there are ready to get painted. And do have the centers on. I did end up painting the axles black, which I actually don't like, but too late now. And do have the intake and exhaust manifold on now. And your carb actually bolts on here, and then your breather tube goes up. And the black part is actually the exhaust. And on this side, and it should have been on the other side of the tractor, I think you can see where it says hot on this side, and I don't know if I can do this. Yep. There you can see it's cold. That's actually a setting where when it's set on cold, it's got a smaller passage in, doesn't allow as much air to come across this part that sticks out here, and this little black piece down here on each side is an exhaust passage. So that preheats the air into the intake. So in the winter time you want to set it on hot so it burns the fuel more efficient. It gives a little more heat to it. And it's about like a lot of the cars used to have heat risers in the exhaust manifold, and did basically the same thing. It gave heat in through the manifold, so it preheats it a little bit, makes it run better when it's cold. Now I've got to get the clutch disc back into the clutch and everything for the belt pulley, and I'll try and get an update later.